The room fell silent the moment the number appeared on the screen, $10 million, bold and glowing, like a dare no one was brave enough to accept. It wasn't just money. It was desperation wrapped in opportunity, a final gamble from a company on the brink of collapse. People shifted in their seats, some whispering, others already shaking their heads. Because whatever it was, the problem that needed fixing, it had defeated the best minds in the industry. And then, in the far back corner of the room, a man no one had noticed slowly stood up. Before we step into his story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of ordinary people, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echoes the Stories. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. His name was Arman Qureshi, and he looked nothing like someone who would change the fate of a billion-dollar company. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his shoes worn at the edges, and his face carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept well in years. Most people didn't know him, and those who did barely remembered him. He was just another employee in the maintenance department, someone who fixed lights, handled repairs, and stayed invisible. But invisibility has a way of hiding the deepest storms. Arman wasn't always this quiet. Years ago, he had been a rising star in engineering, known for his sharp mind and unconventional thinking. He had dreams then, big ones. But life, as it often does, had rewritten his story without asking permission. A tragic accident had taken his wife, leaving him alone with a newborn son and a mountain of responsibilities he wasn't prepared for. Overnight, ambition turned into survival. The man who once designed complex systems now fixed broken pipes and flickering bulbs, because it was stable, predictable, and allowed him to be there for his child. His son, Zion, was his entire world. Every decision, every sacrifice, every silent struggle revolved around that little boy. Nights were spent helping with homework, mornings were rushed with packed lunches and sleepy smiles, and in between, Arman carried a quiet guilt, the feeling that somewhere along the way, he had abandoned his own potential. Meanwhile, the company he worked for, Virion Dynamics, was drowning. A critical system failure had crippled their flagship technology, costing them millions every day. Experts had been flown in from across the globe, consultants had pored over data, and engineers had worked around the clock. Nothing worked. The problem was too complex, too unpredictable, almost as if the system had developed a mind of its own. That was when the CEO, Kareem Halvorson, made the announcement. $10 million to anyone who could fix it. Not just employees, anyone. It was a bold move, but also a desperate one. The company was weeks away from shutting down. Arman hadn't planned to attend the meeting. He had only been there because a faulty air conditioning unit needed checking. He stood at the back, tools still in his hand, listening as experts debated theories he had once understood intimately. Something stirred inside him, a flicker of the man he used to be. For days after that meeting, he couldn't shake the feeling. At night, after putting Zion to bed, he would sit at the small dining table, staring at old notebooks filled with equations and sketches from a life he had buried. The problem the company was facing, it wasn't impossible. It was just, misunderstood. But stepping forward meant risking everything. It meant exposing himself to scrutiny, to failure, to the possibility that he wasn't the man he used to be. Still, something stronger than fear began to grow. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the quiet hope that he could give his son a better future. Or maybe it was simply the realization that running away from his own potential had cost him more than he could afford. On the fifth day, he made his decision. When Arman stood up in that crowded room, people barely noticed at first. The conversation continued, filled with technical jargon and frustration. It wasn't until he cleared his throat, softly, almost apologetically, that a few heads turned. He didn't look confident. He didn't look like a hero. But there was something in his eyes, something steady, something unshaken. He walked to the front slowly, aware of the skeptical glances, the quiet whispers. The CEO studied him with curiosity, perhaps wondering if this was a joke. But Armand didn't hesitate. He simply said he wanted to try. What followed was not a moment of instant brilliance, but a process, painful, uncertain, and filled with doubt. Armand spent hours analyzing the system, often staying late into the night after everyone had left. He wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. He was trying to understand. The problem, as it turned out, wasn't just technical. It was human. The system had been designed with layers of complexity, built by different teams over time, each adding their own solutions without fully understanding the whole. It wasn't broken, it was overwhelmed. Like a mind carrying too many thoughts, it had collapsed under its own weight. Armand approached it differently. Instead of adding more fixes, he began removing them. Simplifying. Stripping away the unnecessary. It was a risky approach, one that others had dismissed as too basic. But sometimes, the simplest solutions are the hardest to see. Days turned into nights, and nights into early mornings. Armand barely slept. His hands trembled from exhaustion, his eyes burned from staring at screens, but he kept going. Because every time he thought about giving up, he saw Zion's face. There were moments when he almost walked away. Moments when the system seemed to fight back, undoing hours of progress in seconds. Moments when the weight of expectation, his own and others, felt unbearable. But he didn't stop. And then, one quiet afternoon, it happened. The system stabilized. At first, no one noticed. There was no dramatic sound, no flashing lights. Just a subtle shift, a calm where chaos had once been. The numbers began to align, the errors disappeared, and the system worked. People gathered around, disbelief turning into astonishment. Engineers double-checked the data, then checked it again. It was real. Armand stepped back, his heart pounding, not quite believing it himself. The CEO approached him slowly, as if afraid the moment might shatter. There were no grand speeches, no immediate celebration. Just a simple question. How did you do it? Armand didn't have a complicated answer. He spoke about understanding instead of control, about simplicity instead of complexity. He spoke about listening, to systems, to problems, to people. But what he didn't say was this: he had learned all of that from life itself. From loss. From raising a child alone. From realizing that sometimes, fixing something doesn't mean adding more, it means letting go. The news spread quickly. The maintenance worker who saved the company became a story people couldn't stop talking about. Offers came in, interviews were requested, and suddenly, Armand was no longer invisible. But the most important moment came later that evening. He returned home, tired but peaceful. Zion ran to him, wrapping his small arms around his father's waist. Armand held him tightly, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not because of the money. Not because of the recognition. But because, for the first time in years, he felt like himself again. And that was worth more than anything. The $10 million changed their lives, of course. It gave them security, comfort, and opportunities Armand had never imagined. But it didn't change who he was. He remained the same quiet man. The same devoted father. The same person who believed that even the most broken things could be fixed, if you understood them deeply enough. As time passed, Armand used his success not just for himself, but for others. He funded education programs, helped struggling families, and quietly supported those who reminded him of who he once was. Because he never forgot. He never forgot the nights of doubt. The weight of responsibility. The fear of being invisible forever. And maybe that's why his story matters. Because it reminds us that greatness doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes, it stands quietly in the back of the room, waiting for the courage to step forward. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and comment, it truly helps these stories reach more people who might need a little hope today. And before we close, here's a special request. Comment, "I believe in second chances," if you felt inspired by Armand's journey. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about fixing a system. It's a story about rediscovering yourself. About finding strength in the quiet moments. About realizing that no matter how far life takes you from your dreams, it's never too late to find your way back.